It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. This week on the show, editor of The Rise of Skywalker conducts an interview, makes some comments about editing The Rise of Skywalker. Clickbait articles ensue. Unfortunately, I feel like all the articles that have been written in regards to the editor for The Rise of Skywalker missed something pretty big that she said, especially when it comes to some theories that have been floating around about one Kylo Ren / Ben Solo. I'll give you my thoughts on it. Plus, apparently Lucasfilm hired some men in black to chase down a podcaster who posted up some rumors and leaks that they had received on Reddit. They wanted to find out who they got the information from to try to track down who the leaker was. So we'll get into that. And from that story and those particular leaks that were posted on Reddit that prompted the shakedown, for lack of a better word, we're going to go down a Sarlacc pit. I found a really, really interesting article looking for one particular piece of information about a lot of things that were supposed to happen with Return of the Jedi, the original plans that didn't happen. And in reading them, I came to the realization that that stuff could possibly play into what happens in the Rise of Skywalker. So we'll dive into that. Of course, as always, your listener feedback. Glad you're with the show this week. Let's go ahead and get it officially started.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight. We'll always be with you. No one's ever really gone.
Disturbing. I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
Glad you're with the show again this week. For those of you that are finding it for the very first time, my name is Jon Justice. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a Star Wars fan before I was a fan of anything else in my life. Seeing the film at age 5, that would be Star Wars A New Hope, before they had the New Hope attached to it, and my life was forever changed. Like so many, I'm a full-time talk show host, podcaster, and author. You can always email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Subscribe and like on YouTube. You can leave a comment there as well. Use that for listener feedback, which we'll get into at the later part of the show. You can also go to mynerdworld.net to find out everything about this particular show. I'm also an author, the books that I write, and where you can go and purchase those books as well. We have a lot to cover on the show this week. I started off doing my prep thinking there wasn't going to be a lot to talk about because there wasn't an awful lot that happened this week beyond sort of Jedi Fallen Order, which looks fantastic, by the way. There's been a lot of promotion around Jedi Fallen Order this week. They released a lot of gameplay at E3 last weekend. A lot of talk about the new Star Wars Saga game, which will include all 9 films and some of the changes they're doing for this is the Star Wars Saga Lego game, which are a lot of fun. So that's been the majority of the talk that's been going on online this week and from StarWars.com and the Star Wars Show. I like to focus mostly on this show about the movies, which is what we're going to do this week, and I have some rather interesting takes on a couple of items that have popped up over the past few weeks and this week as well. Let's not waste any time whatsoever.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
All right, so here's the deal. As always, if you're listening to this show and you've been listening to it for a while, you know that I'm going to get into some spoilery, doing that thing with my fingers and leaked areas. If it's something really, really spoilery, I'm going to give you a warning. A lot of the stuff that I cover is mostly what is called Walmart and Target spoilers, stuff that could possibly show up on packaging, stuff that's already in the trailers. There are some items here that are leaked stuff, and so this is all part of that. So if you want to remain sort of spoiler-free, then yeah, I'd skip ahead a little bit later on to when we get into some of the speculation portion of the show about 10 minutes from now. If not, you know the deal when it comes to talking about the leaks on this show. So Marianne Brandon is the editor for The Rise of Skywalker, and she sat down for an interview. This actually happened a couple weeks ago. I didn't talk. I think I may have mentioned it in passing on the show. But there's been a lot of articles that have popped up in regards to her comments specifically about The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I don't have the audio, but I do have the comments here, and I've sort of bullet pointed it for you. So we'll kind of break it down. So the core of what she was saying when it came to The Rise of Skywalker was that they had a much smaller window to produce this film than they did for The Force Awakens, because she worked on The Force Awakens. And because of that, she was editing on the set. And initially, when she asked J.J. Abrams if she could edit while they were filming on the set, J.J. was like, no, why would you do that? And she basically had said that she's done this on other movies, allow her the opportunity to give this a shot, and J.J. obliged. Well, J.J. ended up liking her editing on the set so much that he ended up telling her that she could not be more than 10 feet away from where he stood at any moment during the filming. Like, he became so reliant and he enjoyed the editing so much on the set that he wanted to make sure that she was as close by as possible, not getting in the way of the shooting of the film, so that he could go and see how the editing was coming. So it ended up working out really well. Here's the thing, though. There were a lot of clickbait articles. Now, if you're listening to the show and you put up an article and it wasn't clickbaity, I'm not talking about you. But if you've been on YouTube or wherever, you've probably seen these articles, especially on Twitter, you've probably seen these articles pop up. They're mostly focused around the crunch time, the scheduling of the film, and how she needed to edit because they were shorter on time making this film than they were The Force Awakens. Now, granted, and I don't have the exact dates in front of me, and it's kind of irrelevant to the larger comment that I want to make about this. But there still was plenty of time. They actually moved the release date of The Rise of Skywalker to December. It was supposed to come out in May of this year. And when J.J. Abrams took over for Colin Trevorrow, they ended up actually pushing that date forward to December. So he gave himself more time. We're only talking about a handful of months. So this is not a situation where it was like on Solo or like it was on Rogue One, but that's where everybody kind of goes to, right? Everybody wants to focus on all of the turmoil surrounding the production of these films. And if you play that game of, if I remove Twitter from this particular storyline, does it end up becoming an issue? No, it doesn't. If you don't have Twitter and YouTube out there perpetuating a lot of the negative talk around the production of these movies, then for the most part, you'd have to go and seek it out in those Hollywood trade magazines that are talking about it. Otherwise, most of us wouldn't even know. You know, there was turmoil that went on during the filming of all of the original trilogy movies, and yet they didn't get talked about nearly as much because there wasn't a way to get all the information out there like there is now with Twitter and all that. So the majority of the commentary around Marianne Brandon and her editing of The Rise of Skywalker was the schedule. And I thought that was really weird. I'm like, so what? I don't care. I thought it was interesting from the creative process because I love learning about how these films are made. I love just hearing about the creative process. I thought that part of it was interesting, but there were all these articles that have been written now about how The Rise of Skywalker is in trouble now and there's a shorter crunch time and they're having to jam it all in. And it's like, oh, just stop already. I'm so tired of all the negativity. Okay, so that aside, she said something else. She said something else in the middle of her talking about the editing on set. She told an anecdotal story, and like nobody picked up on this. I mean, I think some people did on Reddit, like in the thread, but like there weren't any articles written about it, and this to me is way more interesting. So she talked about how weird it was that here she is on the set in this underwater tank scene, right? And we know this happens because we've already seen the Death Star in a body of water, and of course we've all seen the Vanity Fair video and the images as well that shows Kylo Ren and Rey that are fighting and there's water around and they're probably on top of the Death Star too. Okay, so But she told this anecdotal story about how she turned around and there was a helmeted Kylo Ren sitting on an apple crate watching her, and she mentioned Adam Driver and said that Adam Driver then spoke to her through the helmet. Okay, so why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because we'll put two and two together. Let's just say for the sake of argument, because the comments were a bit separated. But let's just say for the sake of argument that moment happened in the middle of when the shots were being filmed for the water tank. In the picture that we saw of Kylo Ren and Rey facing off for the Vanity Fair image, Adam Driver didn't have his helmet on. We've seen his helmet on in that artwork that was done, that stylized emblem that was done for the pin that was on Loungefly that we covered about a month ago, where it shows an outline of a helmeted Kylo Ren and Rey squaring off against each other with watermarks in the background. Okay, so a couple of things here. One, I think that kind of reinforces this idea that unless that helmet comes off, that Vanity Fair image was posed, was set up to show a Kylo Ren without his helmet squaring off against Rey, in the same way that the photograph for Captain Phasma on Takodana with her helmet off was photographed for the Vanity Fair piece, and she wasn't even on Takodana. And then you go all the way back to the Phantom Menace and the one that everybody cites most often, and that is the Obi-Wan Kenobi jumping with his lightsaber ignited against Darth Maul, who was also jumping on Tatooine with his lightsaber ignited, which never ever happened in the film. It's also interesting, too, because of the theory going around that perhaps the person in the helmet that we see being reforged in the trailer is an imposter, that somebody else is putting on Kylo Ren's helmet. Now, that could still obviously happen. However, it certainly does point to the fact that Kylo Ren does indeed have the helmet on, the reforged helmet at some point in time, and that could even be towards the end of the film, assuming that this is heading up to the climax of the movie. We honestly don't know at this point in time. I mean, if you had shown me the Praetorian Guard scene at length, I would have guessed from The Last Jedi that would have been the end of the film, and as we all know, there's a whole other hour that takes place after that. So I just thought that all that imposter talk going around, if you hadn't heard, there's just been a lot of rumors and theories about whether or not the person in the helmet is an imposter. And in the trailer, somebody did a messed with the lighting, and you can see a Knight of Ren in the background. And we'll get to this in just a moment, because there was a Rise of Skywalker summary that may or may not be real, but we'll give you some details of it anyways, where it talks a bit about this. And, of course, there's also the rumor and leak that came out that the Knights of Ren reforged the helmet for Kylo Ren to sort of bring him back to fulfill his dark side ambition, because he had failed in killing Rey, and so he needed the helmet to sort of channel his dark side energy. So I just thought that was a more interesting point that the editor made beyond the editing of the film on the set, that she pointed out there was a helmeted Kylo Ren there standing behind her, which would confirm that indeed Kylo Ren wears the helmet. She also talked about the scope of the film, which I thought was really interesting, and we'll get into a bit of this as well coming up in just a moment. But she talked about how it was a big movie. And it's tough to get a gauge of that by just what we've seen in the trailer and the limited knowledge that we have of the film so far. Just because we really haven't seen anything that lends itself to something big in scope. You look at the trailer, and it could have the same scope as The Force Awakens. And The Force Awakens had a pretty big scope, right? I mean, we went to multiple planets, and there was a lot going on, but it certainly was simplified more so than, say, going back to the prequels, right? I think a lot of, you look at a movie like Revenge of the Sith, and to me, that's a movie that's much bigger in scope. I even think Attack of the Clones is really big in scope, especially compared to The Phantom Menace, right? So that idea that she talked about how big the film was got me really excited. Sort of this idea of we haven't seen nothing yet, right? One more quick point, and then we're going to get to this Rise of Skywalker summary while we work through these leaks, and then we'll talk about how Lucasfilm apparently hired some individuals to go seek out a podcaster who posted some Reddit leaks, and we'll dive into that. First off, though, just a quick side note that occurred to me in the middle of when I was doing the show this week, and that is, we know that the desert planet that we see in the trailer and in a lot of the photographs is Pisana, and it looks a lot like Tatooine, and everyone's kind of scratching their heads going, why are we on this particular planet? And okay. I wonder, because I know that MakingStarWars.net had suggested this, but I wonder if the reason why we've got a desert planet, after Jakku, and I mean, you can even go to Rogue One and Jeddah, right? They all have a little bit different topography, but not by much. Why do we have this new desert planet? Why don't just make it Tatooine? I wonder if it's because at the end of this film, we're going to be going to Tatooine. And so JJ wanted some type of desert landscape for some other portion of the movie, didn't want to use Tatooine because Tatooine will play a part at the end of the film. And we'll dive into this when we get into some of the possible old scripts from Return of the Jedi and what may or may not have been pulled from those scripts that might be used in the Rise of Skywalker. So I just wanted to throw that little nugget in there. Speaking of nuggets, one more quick one, and then we'll get to more of these leaks. We were talking about J.J. Abrams taking over the truncated timeline of the Rise of Skywalker, and that, of course, leads back to Colin Trevorrow, the Jurassic World director who was booted from directing The Rise of Skywalker, or Star Wars Episode 9, because I'm sure he didn't have a title. Not apparently, this is true, Frosty Weintraub over at Collider had heard a rumor and got it confirmed by the director, Colin Trevorrow. The TIE Echelon at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which has, like, the cockpit of the transport from Rogue One, wings kind of like Vader's advanced TIE. It's a really cool-looking ship. I know they're selling toys of it at Galaxy's Edge. I keep hoping somebody buys some of them and throws them up on eBay, but I haven't seen them yet because I really want to get my hands on one. Apparently, that ship was designed by the production team for Episode 9 way back when Colin Trevorrow was in charge. Apparently, they were working early on concepts for a rejuvenated First Order, and they developed this new transport TIE Echelon ship, and it ended up being repurposed and built full size for Galaxy's Edge. Early on in the press visits to Galaxy's Edge, some of the Disney Imagineers had told the press that they believed that ship was going to appear in a movie, and everybody kind of speculated that it was going to be The Rise of Skywalker. But we haven't heard anything about that since then, and nobody's gone to confirm it, beyond that. So I just thought that was really interesting, and as you know, if you listen to the show, I love the vehicles in Star Wars, and that ship is really, really cool looking, and I'm desperate to get my hands on a toy version of it.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right, so we're still in sort of the leaks, rumors part of the show, right? It's going to be a bulk of the conversation this week. But there was a Rise of Skywalker summary that was posted. It didn't end up staying on the Reddit's leak page. The moderator over there, Spartacus, I think, really, really good at what he does, moderating that page. But they removed it just because there wasn't anything to really confirm whether or not it was official. It's kind of just a roundup of things that we already know. There are some interesting things that are alluded to in it, so I thought it was worth sharing this summary. They call it a synopsis, but it's more like it is more like a summary. Bring me a summary. We are the Knights of Ren Husseini. Sorry. For those that know Monty Python, you got the joke. It wasn't that good. All right, so this is what it reads, right? Somebody posted this online. I think Star Wars Theory had done a whole video on this, but this is what it reads. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. The 9th and final episode of the Star Wars franchise. A year after the events of the last film, the remaining members of the Resistance desperately seek to topple the consolidated galaxy-wide rule, the First Order. Okay, so far so good. With Kylo Ren having now taken over as Supreme Leader, the Knights of Ren return with the dark peace he has been searching for. the remaining complete armor of his lineage, Darth Vader. Okay, that's kind of where it jumps the shark. I don't know. That all seemed pretty burned up on Endor, be that as it may. But as he seeks to chart a new path for the First Order to dominate the galaxy, the Resistance attempts one last-ditch effort to topple their iron rule, as Poe Dameron is now in charge of the Resistance forces, including his new commanders, Finn and Rose, who must travel from planet to planet in hiding while General Leia ventures to the Outer Rim to try and recruit her allies to their cause. Okay. Yeah, so far, so good. Like I said, the armor part of it I'm not really buying, but there's some interesting nuggets in here that can send us down and will send us down on a rather interesting path. But when the Force spirit of Emperor Palpatine soon reemerges from the shadows, where he has been pulling the strings all along, he inhabits the willing body of a young dark side acolyte of Kylo Ren's. A lot of people are speculating this would be Matt Smith, and we've heard this rumor before, and I've talked about this rumor on the show. And while Rey, who's been on her own mission to translate the ancient Jedi texts in order to ultimately determine the truth about her lineage, soon realizes that her Force connection to Kylo Ren is growing stronger, the two will find themselves forced to team up together in an effort to eliminate the growing influence of the Emperor once and for all. But as the Resistance fighters make their way to the jungle moon of Yavin, and amongst the rubble of the previously destroyed Death Star, the Emperor's powers might just be too great as he attempts to spread the powers of the dark side in this grand epic final climactic battle for the fate of the Force in the entire galaxy. Okay, so what do you make of all this? I don't make a lot from it. A lot of this feels like, and I think there's a specific reason why this was pulled off of the Reddit leaks page. The moderator there has some contacts and is pretty good at sending stuff to his official contacts way to determine its validity. And the fact that it didn't stay on the Reddit leaks page leads me to believe that there was enough stuff in here that was not corroborated by the people that the Reddit leaks page moderator has contact with. That means it probably was just written by a fan. Because there's a couple of things here that don't stick, right? Especially Yavin versus Endor. The footage that we see in the Rise of Skywalker trailer, right? Everybody assumes it's Endor. This has been talked about ever since the trailer came out after Celebration. How there's water on Endor, it could be one of the moons, and all this stuff. And it makes a heck of a lot more sense if they're traveling there and Palpatine is returning. That connection there is Endor, being it would be Death Star 2, because that's where Palpatine allegedly went and died, so then a connection, it would be that one. Okay. I think there's also a possibility that there could be both things happening here. You could have Yavin and you could have Endor both in the film. The only reason why I bring this up is this. One, there has been semi-official confirmation that what we saw in the trailer and that remaining piece of the Death Star 2 was indeed Endor. There was a British children's official Star Wars magazine or website had posted a blurb. And again, this came officially from Star Wars. Posted a blurb, and in that blurb, it mentioned Endor specifically. Now, granted, it could have been a case where the writer was simply extrapolating what they believed based off of what we saw, and the obvious conclusion, as I just laid out, was that the piece of the Death Star did fall on Endor, and that's why they mentioned Endor. It wasn't done in an official capacity. They were just extrapolating, making a smart assumption. Okay. That could potentially leave the door open for Yavin to be a part of this as well, and maybe the connection of Palpatine to a Death Star has nothing to do with his apparent resurgence in the film. We just did that as fans. Okay. So, when you get to would it be Yavin, the first thing that popped into my head, let's just say for the sake of argument, Yavin is in the film. There were a couple of different photos, and I actually have them here on my desktop. I'm going to use one of these for this week's photo for the show when I post it once I'm finished. But there was a photo of J.J. Abrams on set talking with C-3PO, right? And behind C-3PO, you can see the C-90 Corvette, and I'll get to more of this in a second. You see it looks like the Tantive 4, right? Same color scheme. It's a C-90 Corvette, and I'll get into more of this. There was also another photo that was released that showed an image from apparently the film that shows that C-90 Corvette, the paint scheme exactly like the Tantive 4, on a jungle planet. Not in a hangar, it's on a jungle planet. The foliage around the ship in that shot matches directly with the foliage around the shot from the film that we also saw at Celebration during the panel, where it has the Millennium Falcon and you have Rey and Poe and Finn and 3PO and Chewbacca all standing there. All of that foliage looks like Endor. So you've got a C-90 Corvette with plant life that looks like Endor. You have a photo of the Falcon and our group of heroes and the Resistance on a planet that looks to be exactly the same as the one with the C-90 Corvette. And then you also have what we believe is the Death Star 2 wreckage on what we believe is Endor. So all of that seems to make a heck of a lot of sense. Okay. The only way, at first I thought, well, it could be Yavin, because that could be the Tantive 4. According to Wikipedia, however, though, and I sort of mentally did this because I know the movie so well, we never see the Tantive 4 after A New Hope. And according to Wikipedia, I don't know if it's canon or not. I know it was in some of the books. The Empire went and destroyed that ship after they captured it from the beginning of A New Hope. Okay. We also know that there is a Tantive, not a Tantive 4. There is a Tantive 4 looking ship. There is a C-90 Corvette that is at the end of Return of the Jedi. And it actually has a name. I gotta believe I wrote it down. I did the research this morning. Okay, so I went and tracked it down. The C-90 Corvette that was at the end of Return of the Jedi over, right, the forest moon of Endor, which we've been talking about. That was actually the Massanaya? That's what it was called. Okay. And it had exactly the same paint scheme as the Tantive 4. And it was in a lot of shots at the end of Return of the Jedi. Okay. So, at least in my opinion, it makes a heck of a lot more sense that if we come across a Tantive looking for ship, it wouldn't be the Tantive 4. It makes a lot of sense that it would be this Massanaya ship that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi that at the end of the film ended up going back down to the planet. This is what I'm driving at. Ended up going back down to the planet for the celebration after the destruction of the Death Star 2, and maybe it's been there ever since. Now, complicating this matter is there was some rumors out there that Kylo Ren would be in a red and white ship. Certainly wasn't the new version of his TIE silencer that we saw in the trailer, which is, obviously replaced the TIE silencer from The Last Jedi. Okay. So we also know that at IgerCon, there was a piece of footage shown to the investors that had Kylo Ren on what one of the attendees said looked like to them was the inside of the Tantive 4. He opens up a box, and in the box is Vader's helmet. So, maybe there is a connection here that Kylo Ren somehow ends up with this ship, this CR-90 Corvette, which, again, not the Tantive 4, unless they've changed it for some reason, unless we get a backstory and the Empire did not destroy it, which is possible, especially when you couple that with the rumor that perhaps C-3PO's memory that was wiped in Revenge of the Sith on the Tantive 4 may have been retrieved, and that might be a part of the plot for the movie. So, if that's the case, then we're going to be getting a retconning of some, or at least an official canonized version of the Tantive 4. Does all that make sense? Like, I was super confused for the longest time in Revenge of the Sith because of the CR-90 Corvette that plays a prominent role in that film, which actually now pushes back against what I just said. Okay, so let me back up even further. So, my understanding is, and let me go, I'll double check just to make sure. All right, first off, let me apologize if all this is getting really confusing because I'm doing a bit of research in the middle of what I'm doing the show so I can kind of drive home this point. All right, so there was a rumor going around that C-3PO, right, who has his mind wiped, allegedly, requested at the end of Revenge of the Sith by Bail Organa, right? Have the droid's mind wipe. What? Okay. So apparently, George Lucas had initially said that in 2010, official sources had stated that the ship in A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith were actually the same. Okay, that it was the Rebel blockade runner, specifically shown in Episode 3, 4, and 3, 4, and 5. Many sources supported this, including The Art of Star Wars. Lucas reveals that the first ship, seen in 1977, will reappear in The Revenge of the Sith. Within the ship, the addition of a restructuring the familiar corridor through which Vader strides. Okay. However, in July of 2005, Rob Coleman, the animation director for Revenge of the Sith, suggested that it was a different vehicle. One of the most fun things about this show was linking the first trilogy to this one, introducing designs that make more of an appearance in A New Hope. The cruiser flown by Bail Organa, for example, is a predecessor to the Rebel blockade runner featured in the first shot of the original Star Wars. It looks a little bit different, but you can tell it comes from the same factory. So the profile for the CR-70 Corvette in Star Wars Insider 90 explains the differences of the two ships to fit with Coleman's comment, stating that Revenge of the Sith version of the CR-70 model and the New Hope version is the Tantive 4 after extensive refitting as the CR-90 model. Okay, so my takeaway on this is it would make a heck of a lot more sense for the ship that we've seen in the images of the Rise of Skywalker to be the Tantive 4, especially if it has that connection to C-3PO, especially since it has the same paint scheme as the Tantive 4, and most of the audience wouldn't even know, because they're not as hardcore as you and I are, that there was another CR-90 Corvette that looked just like the Tantive 4 at the end of Return of the Jedi. All the stuff that I just read about the comments from the makers of the film lead me to believe that in a post-Disney buying Lucasfilm, the true story of the Tantive 4 has not been placed in canon, which now we can circle all the way back. Okay, so if it is the Tantive 4, does that necessarily mean that it would be on Yavin? I'm going to argue no, because of the background and the plant life and how the planet looks similar to the other photos that we talked about that we assume is Endor, right? Plus, if they were going to visit the Tantive 4 and it was still that particular ship, if they're going to show it on Yavin, I would assume that it would end up being in front of the temple on Yavin. I think part of the other reason why this is also getting as much attention as it is because in the trailer, you've got that image of Leia holding the award, the medal from the ceremony on Yavin at the end of A New Hope. And I think that's, when you're connecting dots and you don't have a lot to work with, you have to work with what you have. And I think there's a lot of people pointing to the connection that particular medal obviously has towards Yavin. Plus this idea that at the end of this movie, we may get a montage like we've gotten for all the other films, which I'll get into a little bit later on in the show. All right, so let's switch gears now that I've completely confused you, and let's go to this interesting story about the podcaster who leaked some information and then had a visit from some people. So, AT Chat. He's a podcaster, shows up on Reddit, makes comments. He was given some info about the Rise of Skywalker a long time ago. He shared it on Reddit, and I watched his response video to this today. And apparently, he didn't mean to get his source in trouble. He was just trying to share some of the information that he was given, and apparently, his buddy got upset, and at least this is my understanding. So this is what he originally wrote. Potential concept leaks for Episode 9, and this was submitted some 4 months ago. Just to preface this, says AT Chat 1357, I work in advertising. A lot of my colleagues have friends over at Lucasfilm. A lot of my colleagues have friends in California, and one of my editors is friends with someone who happens to be close to an employee of Lucasfilm. Sorry, I got my words jumbled there. Unfortunately, that's all I know. But 2 years ago, he was yapping with us about some concepts from The Last Jedi that were so detailed, that were very detailed, and then I saw them on screen, meaning that this person can be taken with a bit of credibility. AT chat went on to say, I don't normally do leaks, but here they are. Take it for what it's worth. So leak 1. Han will reappear to Kylo Ren at some point as a vision and will set him off into a fit of rage. Okay? Leak number 2. Luke is a Force ghost. Will catch Anakin's lightsaber when Rey throws it at him. It's almost the antithesis of the Last Jedi moment. It shocks Rey. Leak 3. Palpatine will be back in some form. I guess he has been filmed, but I have no idea if it's a flashback, Force ghost, etc. This was all before we got confirmation that Palpatine was going to be back in the trailer. Okay? This was all before that. And leak 4 was, in the beginning of the film, Leia will somehow be training Rey a little bit. That's it. I find it interesting. If these things do come to fruition, then I think Episode 9 might be pretty bonkers. The image leaks already look like something out of Thor Ragnarok. And, of course, he's talking about the images that we've talked about of all the characters and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so what does this all mean? Well, what happened was, according to AT chat, that shortly after this was posted, somebody had showed up at his house. And it was a couple of basically professional men who had apparently been hired by Lucasfilm to go and track this individual down. And he ended up having an hour-long conversation in his house with these two individuals while they grilled him about what he knew and what he didn't know. And they were all attempting to try to find the person who leaked this information to him. The one that really stuck out was probably the Palpatine leak, because we had no idea about that, apart from a few random people who had simply been speculating that Palpatine would be back in this movie again. So it does sort of raise the question of, when it comes to these particular leaks, it looks like there could be some legitimacy to them, right? Han will appear to Kylo at some point as a vision, and it will set him off into a fit of rage, okay? Luke is a Force ghost. We'll get into this. We'll catch Anakin's lightsaber. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That certainly has been shown that Force ghosts can connect with objects in the real world. Palpatine back, we know that already. And then Leia somehow training Rey a little bit is interesting. I think a lot of that's going to depend on what sort of footage did J.J. Abrams have to work with of Carrie Fisher, and was there something that he could work with that would lend itself to Leia giving Rey some tips and pointers on Force usage, which would, as some people have pointed out online, really go a long way, I think, to helping individuals who did not like the Mary Poppins scene, doing that thing with my fingers, that occurred in the Last Jedi. You know, of course, as always, as we work through all of these, if you got a comment, leave it on YouTube or drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. There's a lot of speculating on the show this week, and I'm trying to keep it all together as much as possible. Okay, so because of these leaks from AT chat, and especially the one where it talks about Luke as a Force ghost catching Anakin's lightsaber, there is a different ending to Return of the Jedi that keeps coming back into my head. And I went online to go and find it. I knew that I could. I just had to find a particular article that went and pointed it out. And I ended up at thethings.com. And this article was written July 13th of 2017, so a couple years old, right? 15 jaw-dropping ways Return of the Jedi was almost a very different movie. So what I did was, and this had the particular news item I was looking for about the Force Ghost at the end of the film, but I actually stumbled across a couple other things that I thought were really interesting that I wanted to share with you on the show this week. So first off, there were more than a few draft versions of Return of the Jedi, it would seem. Kenobi was always set to return for the sequel. In the final version of the movie, Ben came back in ghost form, delivered vital exposition to Luke, and then disappeared until the celebration at the end. Okay? Apparently, early plans for Obi-Wan's return were way more ambitious. One draft, it was noted, Obi-Wan was supposed to appear to Darth Vader toward the end of the movie and urge him to turn away from the dark side. Later, both Ben and Yoda were to appear in the final battle between Luke, Vader, and Palpatine. Although these possibilities are interesting, such intrusions, the article writer says, in the story would have been a deviation from the I cannot interfere approach that Ghost Obi-Wan maintained in the movies. It was also noted by IO9 that the alternative idea was to have Obi-Wan and Yoda come back in the flesh to literally join Luke and his friends for the final celebration. Okay, so I've read different versions of this, and I actually think at some point in time I read the piece of the script that was attached, or at least some of the writings of it, unless it was just fanfic. which is why I didn't bother to grab it for the show this week. But I've read many times throughout the years that the original version at the end of Return of the Jedi was the Force Ghost coming back to help assist in bringing down Palpatine once and for all. I can't help but wonder and speculate that with the title Rise of Skywalker, the return of Palpatine, the weirdness surrounding the photograph of Luke Skywalker that seemed to be taken from the Last Jedi sessions that was in the Vanity Fair session. There's also been some rumors out there, certainly MakingStarWars.net has pointed out that there's been a lot of talk that even resurrection of Luke Skywalker, or maybe that has to do with the Rise of Skywalker. I cannot help but wonder if J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio went back to those early drafts of Return of the Jedi and are pulling some ideas, especially if, and this is a little bit of evidence to point towards that, especially if it turns out that what J.J. said was true and that he did consult with George Lucas. If he did consult with George Lucas, I could imagine George Lucas saying, well, JJ, the original idea that I had was to have them come back and help him at the end because the Force Ghost can interact with the real world. That's a horrible George Lucas impersonation. I apologize. So I could definitely see that. And like I've said, we do know and we do have circumstances in canon of Force Ghosts interacting with the real world. I mean, Yoda bops Luke on the nose with his cane in The Last Jedi for crying out loud. So, I'll continue to open up the question and get your thoughts. What do you think about that? What do you think about the possibility of Luke coming in at the end of this film to help with whatever the situation is? Getting involved, perhaps, a resolution with Ben Solo that helps bring him back from the dark side. This movie is going to be something. I just, as I work through the little bit of stuff that we have and I try to make sense of it on the show, I just, coupled with the comment from the editor, right, about how big the movie is, I just think that this film is going to be a heck of a lot more complicated and deep and rich with lore than we expect, especially given, sort of The Force Awakens wasn't that fantastic film. I love that film, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, The Last Jedi went a lot more when it came to the Force than The Force Awakens did. All right, so there are a couple other nuggets about Return of the Jedi that may or may not relate to what we know about the Rise of Skywalker. However, I just thought it was interesting. So check out this nugget. In early drafts of Return of the Jedi, Moff Jerjerrod, right, the guy at the beginning, says, we should double our efforts. Right, I need more Ben. He was not just another Imperial lackey shoved around by Vader. Jerjerrod was initially planned to be a rival who had no issues brazenly defying Vader. In fact, Jerjerrod was even going to actively seek to gain the Emperor's favor. Of course, none of this came to pass. Vader's only on-screen power struggle with the Imperial ranks was back in A New Hope with Admiral Modi. Even then, Vader nearly murdered his mouthy rival over his disturbing lack of faith line, right? Over his disturbing lack of faith. That prompted the, I find your lack of faith disturbing. This type of power dynamic was later explored in The Force Awakens, but through different top-level villains, Kylo Ren and General Hux, which brings me to Allegiant General Pride, played by Richard E. Grant. Okay, so, and again, this is, obviously I'm just, I got the cork board up, I got the yarn, and I got my push pins, and I'm just connecting dots. Wouldn't it be interesting that in drawing some other ideas from Return of the Jedi, they also drew this idea that there was going to be another general, in this case, Allegiant General Pride, to play foil to Kylo Ren in this film in a way that Jerjerrod was supposed to do it to Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi. All right, here's more. Over the years, one of the more interesting talking points among Star Wars fans is the perception that Obi-Wan Kenobi was deceitful toward Luke. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan told Luke that Darth Vader has killed his father. Some argue Obi-Wan's certain point of view speech 2 movies later felt dishonest. Again, the details and the story of this subplot retcon can be discussed endlessly. But for our purposes, let's concentrate on how the issue could have been resolved with one deleted line from Return of the Jedi. As it turns out, apparently Obi-Wan only bent the truth because that was Yoda's command. As you'll note from the raw footage via YouTube, Yoda, that's funny. his sister, Loda. Yoda flat out confessed to Luke. Obi-Wan would have told you long ago had I let him. The huge revelation was that Yoda's decision to withhold information from Luke about his parentage was quite significant. This confession from Yoda could have made Obi-Wan's character seem less wishy-washy when it came to the truth. So again, that's really interesting to me. And then not even necessarily related to the Rise of Skywalker, except to say that it does sort of open up this idea that while they may not directly pull from a deleted line that was on a YouTube clip, right? This idea, though, when we talk about Rey's parentage and how J.J. Abrams said it's going to be further explored, that we still could very much get a certain point of view angle. Now, I don't believe that Rey is related to Luke or Kylo Ren in any way, shape, or form. I think she is a nobody, but I think there are ways that you can add some significance to her lineage, especially if we start getting into some of the stuff with Palpatine and some of the rumors going around on that front. I just thought that particular nugget was rather interesting and was worthy enough to share, even though it didn't necessarily directly relate to the Rise of Skywalker. Okay, one more from this thethings.com article. As noted over at Wired, instead of an Ewok celebration, we could have possibly seen the marriage between Han Solo and Princess Leia. I had never heard this before until now. The source suggested that supposedly the final scenes were to mirror the ceremony of the Star Wars finale, but instead of Luke, Han, and Chewie getting medals, we'd witness the marriage of Han and Leia. Although cheesy, such a scene probably could have worked. Then again, since the movie was originally going to be darker, maybe they could have went for a red wedding. Ha ha, very funny. In which case, from Game of Thrones for those who don't watch the show, in which case the movie would have been R-rated and the ending would have given the fan nightmares. Okay, I probably should have edited that part out. My apologies. Look, I found that was interesting, and I'm going to get into this right now because it set me again down this Sarlacc pit. Because we know that Lucas got his wedding between Anakin and Padme in Attack of the Clones. It got me thinking, though, about the finale of the very end of The Rise of Skywalker. Okay. And what is the end of The Rise of Skywalker going to be? Okay. So, while we let's get into this for just a second. So, perhaps that The Rise of Skywalker trailer shot with Leia and the medal was a part of the closing portions of the film. I'm pretty sure that shot we saw in the trailer of Princess Leia holding the medal was a CGI replacement of the lightsaber she was holding from the footage from The Force Awakens, but it could be anything. And StarWarsNewsNet.com had a fantastic article about how they were using the footage and even film from the actual movie The Force Awakens that was seen on screen for the recreation of Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia in The Rise of Skywalker. But when you go back and consider the ending of Revenge of the Sith, and how it had a montage ending. Abbreviated because we knew where Yoda was going. His arrival on Dagobah was shot, but it wasn't put in the film. And then we have Leia baby arriving on Alderaan and Obi-Wan with Luke baby arriving on Tatooine. And there we have our montage ending. Okay, pretty simple, heartfelt. That final shot of Revenge of the Sith that we thought was going to be the last shot of any new Star Wars film was absolutely fantastic. You get into Return to the Jedi, and you see more of a classic montage, especially with the special edition of worlds we had visited, celebrating, and then the group gathering and the Force Ghost there on Endor. My guess is we'll get something closer to Revenge of the Sith in the ending for The Rise of Skywalker with characters and locations. I don't think that the First Order is going to have been in a position where they would have taken over as much of the galaxy, obviously, that the Empire had to warrant visiting locations that we went to throughout the series unless there was a personal attachment to them. So, when you look at, Rey, Jakku, maybe. Tatooine, maybe. Yavin, maybe, right? These types of places. Kashyyyk with Chewie, maybe. I think we're going to have a much more subdued ending where we find out where all our key players are going to end up and what planets they're on, and not necessarily which was way more like, again, Revenge of the Sith, and not necessarily the sort of grandiose, galaxy-wide, we're going to all these planets and seeing everybody celebrating the fall of the First Order, because I just don't think, again, the First Order would have been able to zero in or would have been able to take over as much of the galaxy for us to go and visit planets like that, if that makes sense. Okay, one more quick point, and then we're going to move over to listener feedback for this week. And that is their ending of Return of the Jedi. So this is a bit spoilery. We have already touched upon this particular spoiler earlier on in the show, so you're not going to be hearing anything incredibly new. But, so the idea of Palpatine returning in The Rise of Skywalker. We've discussed it before. There's a lot of rumors going around about how the ending of the film could involve the essence of Palpatine possessing a member of the Knights of Ren. Perhaps it's Matt Smith. And that's how he ends up coming back. Maybe we get Ian McDiarmid in a flashback scene doing some acting, but that we may never actually see the physical manifestation of Ian McDiarmid, Darth Sidious and Palpatine. He is possessing other individuals, and there's even been rumors that maybe he was actually inside of Snoke, which I don't think are necessarily true. Here's a thought that I wanted to throw at you. Would you be okay? Okay, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And again, you can put a comment on YouTube. Would you be okay with finding out that Palpatine used his Force lightning to transfer his consciousness into Vader's armor? So here's my theory. I'm not saying I'm adhering to this. I'm just wondering how you would feel about this, right? What if, in that moment in time at the end of Return of the Jedi, you have paid the price for your lack of vision. Now you will die, right? I combine those two. I know they're separate. What if that was really Palpatine trying to take over Luke? Right? What if Palpatine found out the way to cheat death was to transfer his consciousness, his essence, right? His mojo. Took my mojo, baby. His mojo into another person. Okay. So what if in that moment he was trying, actually, he was right, Luke was going to die, but he was only going to die because Palpatine was going to take over that body. Okay. Or maybe he was trying to kill Luke. And maybe the rumor that the reason why Palpatine at the end of the Rise of Skywalker can't possess Rey is because she's too light side, but he can get into Kylo, which is all of what brings about his redemption, right? You sort of kill off Kylo to bring back Ben and kill off Palpatine's essence, right? So what if he was trying to kill Luke in that moment, and he couldn't transfer his consciousness into Luke because of the fact that he was, adhering to the good side? But the moment that Vader grabbed him, because, again, for the sake of argument, we'll say the Palpatine rumor is true of taking over bodies. He can't take over Luke, but he could put himself, say, into Vader's helmet. I like that idea. You go back and watch the film, and I remember as a kid and still to this day, the shot of the lightning coursing through Vader's helmet and then you seeing the skull behind it. That was awesome as a kid. I thought that was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. So, in retrospect, to actually have that be the moment, if they retcon that whole bit, that it's not just the lightning coursing through Vader's helmet, but it actually is Palpatine possessing Vader's helmet, that goes along with this idea that maybe Kylo Ren wasn't talking to Vader all along. He was talking to Palpatine in the helmet. I really dig that. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you feel about that. I think that's a really cool idea. And I know that it's going to turn some stuff on its head, and I know some of the leaks out there have said that our perception of events from the original trilogy are going to change with this film. I would be absolutely okay with that, but I'm curious what you think. I also think that having Palpatine being the one, if Kylo all this time is thinking that he's being led on by Vader, but it was really Palpatine, that takes away the need to have Snoke connected to Palpatine. Because what if it was Palpatine, and Palpatine knew he needed to get Kylo, he needed to finish his grand vision, but he was masquerading as Vader through the helmet, show me grandfather, the dark side, I feel the light again. And maybe it's Palpatine who convinces Kylo Ren to get rid of Snoke because he knows it'll all lead to part of his grander plan. Again, I'm just spitballing here. Talkshownerd@gmail.com. As always, you can leave a comment on YouTube. What do you think? Let's go ahead and get into your listener feedback for this week. But first off,
This is not going to go the way you think.
hey, I just want to promote my book for 1 second. If you're New to the show, you may not have heard about this. If you're not new, you know I talk about it every week. But selling books is not easy, and I like to take the opportunity to give the audience a chance to get caught up with my science fiction books that I am writing. All right, so I've written a science fiction book. It's called Embark. It is available on Amazon.com. The second and third books are being edited and written as we speak and will be out this year. But get caught up with the first book in the series. It's the not-so-distant future, and car culture is replaced by air and space flight, made possible by two of Earth's largest corporations. Flight mechanic Taft Gardia spends his free time racing through the skies with his three best friends and the girl he longs to be with, headstrong Katha Morrow. With the planet on the brink of an industrial apocalypse, a powerful and ruthless corporate madman, Sin Argam moves to exploit the disaster with his covertly created military. When Taft, Katha, and their friends uncover a shocking secret, Sin Argam will stop at nothing to find them. Time is running out on Earth, but with the help of a ragtag group of young pilots, they'll fight for humanity's survival and future among the stars. So this is what some of the reviews are saying about Embark. Seriously exciting sci-fi with characters you'll love. If you like adventure, a fast-paced storyline with characters you can get behind, this is your next book. I can't wait for the next installment. This book had me hooked immediately. Right now, you can get Embark. This is book 1. Book 2 will be out in the next few months. Free on Kindle Unlimited. It's $2.99 for the ebook, $11.99 for the paperback. The ebook is free with the purchase of the paperback, and a purchase of the $2.99 ebook gets you the audiobook on Audible for only $7.50. Go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and Embark, Embark. You can also go to mynerdworld.net, and there you can also find information not only about the book, but the follow-up book, the synopsis for the sequel, where to buy the book, and also everything related to this podcast. If you want to show support, then please head on over to Amazon or mynerdworld.net and pick yourself up a copy of any of the different versions, either for you or a friend, and I just want to say thank you in advance.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
And oftentimes that's you every single week because you write in, and this is the listener feedback portion of the show. A couple of emails slipped through my fingers last week, so we'll get to them to kick things off. Supernova Jazzy writes this: Hello, I'm a new listener to your amazing podcast, and YouTube actually recommended you to me, and the first video I saw was the Vanity Fair episode not too long ago, and I was very surprised that a guy can be so positive about The Last Jedi. Oh my gosh. I love The Last Jedi. I think it's the best Star Wars movie ever. I will literally fight anyone who says otherwise. Just saying. I was also pleasantly surprised that you were on board with Reylo. A guy on board with Reylo? Huh? Yeah, I'm a hopeless romantic. I was like, no way! I don't mean to marginalize the fan base, but the majority of people hating on The Last Jedi and Reylo are fanboys. The hate never really got to me, but the more people were vocal about it, the more it got under my skin. You are literally a breath of fresh air, man. Please keep doing what you're doing. You are so genuine and awesome. Wow. I also bought your book on Amazon as an ebook, and I can't wait to read it this weekend. Take care, from Jazzy. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. You guys are so kind, and I really do appreciate that. I had something slated for this week's show. I'm going to do it on next week's show just because I played it smart and I was packing too much into this show. But somebody at Nerdist put up an article, and it was an argument against Reylo. I will do a point-by-point breakdown of that article on next week's show because this one just got so full. So just as a sort of heads up for next week. All right, friend of the show, Severin, writes this. After your comments about Disney keeping Star Wars alive for future generations, I kept thinking of this video of my nephew who was 2 years old watching Star Wars Rebels on TV. It's horribly cute. He is absolutely unable to peel his eyes off the screen as he slowly moves his hand from his popcorn bowl to his mouth. He probably hasn't even seen the original trilogy yet, but his intense stare as he follows the characters on screen pretty much goes to show that Disney is succeeding in fostering a new generation of Star Wars lovers. People who complain about all the changes, different locations, new shows, universal rides, and spin-offs in the Star Wars universe just don't really get it. Star Wars evolves with the generations that grow into it. That's why I still think somewhat fondly of Jar Jar Binks, despite all the fan hatred surrounding him. I grew up with that character, just like other people grew up with Luke Skywalker in the original gang, and my nephew is growing up with another branch of Star Wars altogether. I'm totally cool with the understanding, and I hope that Disney and total nerds from birth like Rian Johnson continues to keep up the good work for future generations. They sure seem to be hitting the nail on the head with my nephew. Thank you so much, Severin. I really do appreciate it. And I know that that's the reason why Disney, just as a side note, that's why Disney did what they did with Galaxy's Edge. They made something that's going to endure, right? You can get your Star Wars, your old school Star Wars on Star Tours. It's fantastic for that, right? And when they put the overlay on Hyperspace Mountain, I'm just talking about Disneyland, but Galaxy's Edge, right? That's setting up for the future. By the way, side note, and I will get into this more on next week's show, but Star Wars Celebration tickets go on sale for August in California, in Anaheim, next week on the 21st on Thursday. I am going, for sure. And I'm hoping to do the show live from Star Wars Celebration. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. We're going to go to Galaxy's Edge, but I will be at Star Wars Celebration next year in Anaheim. And I'm hoping to not only do the show live there as one of the podcast shows, but I'm also hoping to do a book signing at some point in a location around Southern California. So I just wanted to point that out, and again, I'll talk about that more in the future. All right, Shock Fitness, friend of the show. So did anyone else notice that Obi-Wan is the only main character with no backstory? No planet of origin, no early life beyond what was depicted in Episode 1. Just thought it was noteworthy, and Tatooine isn't his home planet. Yeah, I really hope they explore that, and I think it's one of those things that we may end up getting if they ever do the Obi-Wan Kenobi live-action TV show or movie. I know that there's a little bit more of that in Master and Apprentice, but you're right, there is no backstory. I'm kind of okay with it for now, and I'm also okay if they give it to us at some point in time. All right, let's see. Princess Cupcakes, I believe, is replying to Shock Fitness. Yes, and he's my favorite Star Wars character, and the only main character to not be tied into a sequel trilogy yet. That's why I was hoping Rey would be related to him in some way. I kind of am, too. I just thought it would have been so sweet if she was his granddaughter. What a wonderful legacy that would have been for him. And if she and Ben got together and had kids, they would have been related to all the main characters in the saga. It would just as beautifully come full circle. I still think there's a possibility that could happen there, Princess Cupcakes. All right, let's go to Lucy. I had to weigh in on the question of whether the sequel trilogy was plotted out in advance. I'm working on a novel myself. I'm a former journalist, and I can write an article with ease, but fiction may be the hardest job I've ever tackled. Like you, I'm a pantser, meaning we've been right by the seat of our pants, but that doesn't mean absolutely no planning. You are 100% right, Lucy. It doesn't. You have to have some idea. Yes, you do, as my voice cracks. You have to have some idea where you are going when you set out, even if you don't have turn-by-turn directions. So I can believe that Rian Johnson was given miles of leeway, but there was simply no way there was no overarching plan, no matter how sketchy. I tend to agree. Would Disney risk a multi-million-dollar movie franchise to which they have added a multi-million-dollar park investment to the whims of a director? I'm willing to suspend disbelief to enjoy a movie, but I can't even get close to that level of credulity. Thank you so much, and I'm glad that I got through credulity there at the end of your comment. Thank you, Lucy, and feel free to email me anytime, by the way, even just sidebar stuff. Considering you're writing fiction, I never in a million years thought that I would write books as much as I am. Having finished 2, one being published, second one being edited, and a quarter way through the third, I can't even begin to express how much enjoyment I've been having with these characters that I've created and this world that I've created, and it all is just this massive extension of my Star Wars fandom. It really does give me that same type of excitement that I get from Star Wars and writing these characters, because that spirit of adventure and what George Lucas created is my inspiration for writing these stories. You can go to Amazon.com and search for Embark, E-M-B-A-R-K, Jon, J-O-N, Justice, and pick up the ebook, audiobook, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. Okay, Dale writes this. I think Canto Bight could have gotten a little less flack with one more cutscene in it. I've seen a video on what or where might be a good spot. I agree. Again, it sounds like I'm defending The Last Jedi, and I am. I don't care. I do not get into the criticism of Finn and how he didn't have a story. I think it's to discredit John Boyega and what he did in that movie. I really do enjoy that. The more I watch The Last Jedi, the more I enjoy that side story with Finn and Rose. Like, if you take that side story with Finn and Rose of their adventure going to Canto Bight and then his inevitable face-off with Captain Phasma and then also with DJ and then returning back to the Resistance, that's a really fun it's a fun story. It really, really is. And it really has grown on me to the point where I absolutely adored from the get-go all the other parts of the movie. If I had any criticism, it was that side plot. I've grown to love that side plot. And look forward to it now every time I go and watch the film. All right, friend of the show, Sky Drathic writes, something about Rey's birth's not going to be natural. She will not be artificially created by Palpatine, because Palpatine already tried to trick the Jedi and prophecy by forcing a fatherless child to exist, Anakin, which means Anakin never truly was the chosen one. Haha, that's good stuff. Nor was it Han/Leia/Ben, so it could still be Rey. I like where your head's at. Don't know if it's true, but I like where your head's at. And Claudia, I think, works very closely with the story group, called Claudia Gray. And I believe she knows that that woman knows what happened to Ben Solo in his youth and the rough outline of what will happen to him in the future, I swear. Good stuff. Also, they go on to say, I heard on another not all that popular podcast where somebody interviewed Claudia Gray, and I thought, whoa, is it that simple? So what do you think about every once in a while trying to get an interview with somebody who once worked on or is still working with Star Wars? Little people talking about their experiences, if you can find someone willing to speak to us. Yeah, I definitely would like to do that in the future. I'll be completely honest with you. The only reason why I haven't is just because I do have a full-time job, and I am writing my novels. So I know it sounds weird, but to add in another layer to the podcast I'm doing by working out, getting interviews, it's something I definitely want to do, but right now I just haven't decided to add it to the list of things required to get the show done every week. But it is a fantastic idea, and Sky Drathic, I always appreciate your comments. All right, J.J. Williams on Twitter writes this: has it been confirmed that the opening scene in the teaser is Reylo against each other? Why doesn't he just blast her? If so, I feel it's very misleading, and that they may be training or fighting together here. But that may be my Reylo feels playing into that. It hasn't been confirmed what's going on. I know that in one of the interviews after Good Morning America, the whole cast said that they didn't feel like there was anything deceiving in the trailer. Like everything seemed to be on the up and up. So take that for what it's worth. I'm still under the opinion, speculating-wise, that Kylo Ren is coming there to square off against Rey, and then he may not even necessarily realize that she's right there. I know that seems ridiculous, or this may play into Kylo's inability to take her down. Or it could be that scene was legit and they just didn't put in any laser fire blasts. Because there is a shot of Kylo Ren later on what appears to be Pisana, standing there without his helmet on. And as I've mentioned before on the show, MakingStarWars.net said that they've seen images or artwork of that particular TIE fighter, that new TIE silencer, sitting in ruins. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on with that shot yet. I know I can't wait to find out. And thank you for the comment, JJ. All right, let's move over to JW. He says this: I think Palpatine's spirit is in Darth Vader's helmet more than Kylo's helmet, because if it were in Kylo's, wouldn't you think that the spirit would have been destroyed when Kylo shattered his helmet in The Last Jedi? Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the Reylo relationship, I think, must be a thing in this movie, because JJ set it up so clearly in The Force Awakens. Such as when he doesn't let her drop to the ground, when he knocks her out, and when he carries her away afterwards. Why would he do that if he didn't have feelings for her? I recently bought your book, Embark. I haven't started reading it, but I plan to very soon. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for buying the book and for the comment, as always, JW. I greatly appreciate it. Aaron, in regards to the Vanity Fair picture, writes this: I kind of agree and disagree about that shot of Kylo and Rey. I think that it is in the movie, but the photo has been taken or edited so that it's misleading. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Peter says this. It's Peter, ! I love anything Star Wars. Love the podcast. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Let's see. Joel Westcott says, all I know is Disney better put more focus on Force users and lightsabers. The Last Jedi didn't have a single lightsaber duel and threatened the end of the Jedi Sith. Without Force users and lightsabers, it's just another space movie, nothing different from Star Trek. Joel, I commented on YouTube, but I'll make it again here. I disagree. The Last Jedi did have a lightsaber duel, right? It had Kylo and Kylo Rey and Ren squaring off against the Praetorian Guards. They had different weapons, but they did have lightsabers. We also had the lightsaber scenes in the flashbacks with Luke and with Ben Solo. We also had the lightsaber scene with the battle on Crate, with the standoff, probably more than a battle, in the standoff between Kylo Ren and Luke at the end. And I agree with there needs to be Force and lightsabers in Star Wars. Threatening the end of the Jedi Sith is one thing when you're looking at Luke saying the Jedi has to end. It's something completely different when you get to the end of the film, and Luke specifically states, I will not be the last Jedi. The rebellion is reborn today. So again, that was a playing within the movie that did not come to fruition by the end of it. And if you look at lightsaber battles in other films, and I know this has been a constant criticism of The Last Jedi, apart from the prequel trilogy, when you get into the original trilogy, I mean, we had Luke igniting the saber. We had Luke on the Falcon against the training ball in A New Hope. You have the end battle, but then really that's kind of it. You get to The Empire Strikes Back, and you get Han using the saber. Well, Luke using it in the beginning with the Wampa, Han using it on the Tauntaun. You get the Force back scene, and then you get the end battle with Darth Vader, right? So I personally feel that the lightsaber usage in The Last Jedi, even though there was no direct one-to-one sort of lightsaber on lightsaber, because you can't really count the standoff between Kylo Ren and Luke, I still think there was plenty of usage. Oh, and then Rey even ignites it when in her standing off against, or squaring off against Luke on Ahch-To. So, and again, I commented on this on YouTube, but that's my thought. All right, let's go here. Misconduct 1. John, you're such a positive commentator. Thanks so much for always staying optimistic. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm hoping for Ben's redemption more than anything else in the story. If romantic Reylo doesn't happen, it'll be okay as long as it's a good story. I agree. I'll forever love the Reylo dynamic, even if it doesn't happen. It brought me so many connections with fellow fans. It led me to new friends. I believe it's another incredible part of what makes this phenomenon we know as Star Wars so incredible. Totally agree. I think Rey finding her own identity is so important to the story because that's part of growing up. Heck, it's all of growing up, finding your identity and finding your own identity, discovering who you are and what you stand for, right? I'm praying the journey for both Rey and Ben ends up on a hopeful note where they find out who they are and where they belong. Thank you so much, as always. I appreciate that. They go on to say, I know this is going to sound ridiculous. My family thinks I am for viewing it this way, but I wanted to say this. I loved Mary Poppins when I was a kid, and still do. Maybe Ryan didn't intend it this way, but this is what I saw. Disney's Mary Poppins was about a father who worked so much that he ignored his children. What does canon say? When Han went back to the only thing he was good at and ignored his child, Mary Poppins was a character who helped redeem the father in the eyes of the children. She brought the children and their father together. Maybe the visual wasn't intentional on Ryan's part, but it is, for me, one of the most beautiful shots in the film because I do love Disney's Mary Poppins, and I did connect in that way with it with me. Leia will be the one to help redeem the father in the eyes of her son and help him see how much Han really did love him. Maybe it sounds crazy or goofy or childish, but for me, it was a big parallel. What if their role, but for me, it was a big parallel of what her role in the story will be. Anyway, you're awesome as always. Thank you. You always say art is subjective, so I'm not afraid to share what I felt about that seed with you. It's a safe space on your channel. Take care and have a great week. Yeah, man. I think that's awesome. I love that fact. There's a lot of stuff in Star Wars that I kind of push into it that wasn't necessarily intended by the creators of the content. I mean, that's what good music does, right? That's why I love Depeche Mode so much. their songs are so ambiguous. You can kind of just make with it what you want. And I like that when you get it. It's subtler in movies because you got to be more direct in films. You can't be as ambiguous. But with Star Wars, there are places where you can certainly inject those things from completely outside what the intent of the director was. Temazaro S. writes this: The Last Jedi made me feel like I was a little kid again, filled with wonderment. I couldn't have asked for anything more. That's fantastic. And I think we'll end on this one. And, Anthea, I don't know if you planned it this way, but it seems like your, comments, pop in, the day that I go to do the podcast. It's awesome. And it seems like I always end on you, which is fantastic because I love your comments. I'm really intrigued about the rumor you mentioned about Kylo not being able to kill Rey, so his Knights of Ren take him to reforge the helmet. That would be a really interesting plot point. Would love to see them doing something like that. From the amount of leaks indicating that Kylo is conflicted in his feelings for Rey, I feel more confident that we will get some aspect of romantic Reylo in this movie. I think that will go a long way to help people buy into redemption. I'm starting to think that this is even more likely to happen. Did you see the discussion on Reddit regarding AT-AT chat? Yep, I did. Talked about it earlier. That makes me believe even more that many of these leaks are true. Otherwise, why would they go to trouble to find the sources? Yeah, I tend to agree, which is why I brought it up on the show. And that's it again for this week. Thank you so much, as always, for checking out the show. I greatly appreciate it. You can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube. Like and subscribe, whatever platform you find the show on. Share it with friends. Spread the love. And if you want to support the show, as always, please go on by Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net and pick up a copy of my first space opera science fiction novel, Embark, as I continue editing Book 2, Treasure in Darkness, and writing Book 3 in hopes to having the entire trilogy out by the end of the year. Thanks again for checking out the show. I look forward to your feedback every single week. And speaking of which, I will talk to you again next week.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.